Hey guys, welcome to the Bass Fishing Underground podcast. We have Chris here from Wholesale Batteries, and we're going to do a whole show about batteries and what you should be using and his thought processes on how you should set up your boat, and then we'll kind of go into some of his past tournaments on the NPFL. So thanks for coming.
Well, thanks for having me. Like you said, I'm Chris with Wholesale Batteries. I'm from Bonner Springs, Kansas. I've been with Wholesale Batteries a little over 2 years. I kind of manage their pro staff as well. So if you see some of our guys out there, don't hesitate to stop in and talk to them. Batteries in the marine industry is a lot of different options out there. People get overwhelmed with what to kind of use, how to have them hooked up. A lot of it depends on how many electronics they have. So we'll just go over kind of a small kind of a setup. So if somebody calls into Wholesale Batteries and they're looking for a setup for their boat, the first thing I ask them is what brand of boat they're running, how avid they are into bass fishing, if they're tournament angler, and then how many types of and different types of electronics they're going to have. Because that's the biggest key is the manufacturers that install wiring in these boats from the factory, they don't really know what this customer is going to use or this customer is going to use for a setup. So it's really hard to incorporate that into their build. Some of them are doing a better job of that now, but we still find some weaknesses in their design, and that's why a lot of people are pulling their own wire now.
So what's the difference? So what wires do they send stock in a boat?
Well, a lot of the manufacturers, they'll have 10 or 12 gauge now. A lot of them are running the 10 gauge, but they'll have a lot of junctions or splices going to other pieces of equipment. So the key with electronics, especially at the front of the boat or at the bow of the boat, is voltage drop. So if you have 2 to 3 units up front and you're running through a factory setup and it goes through a fuse block in the back of the boat, so there's more connections there, and then it goes to the battery. By the time you get up to the front of the boat, you're going to have a lot of voltage drop. And that's where people start to have their issues. There's a lot of different or other solutions for that type of a problem. But in general, people are pulling their own wire now, or having a rigging company like the Bass Tank. The Bass Tank can pull your wires. Different boat dealers, Boat Works can do that as well. Yep. But there's companies that specialize that in their that now. So the key is having direct runs from the battery to the electronics. Most of the electronics come with inline fuses, and those are fine and those are suitable to use. But from that point, it needs to go straight to the battery. Some people, like what I do, is I'll put a main disconnect right before the battery, and that's so I can isolate all of my electronics to where if I have a problem, I can put an amp clamp on there. And try to figure out what the problem is. Or another thing I can do is I can turn on individual electronics, and I can put a sheet of paper and I can put what each electronic pulls amp-wise. So I'll have a good idea what I'm pulling, and that gives me a good idea for what type of batteries and
so
and
you
how
you
many
have
batteries.
a switch in the back of your boat. Obviously, most everybody has a switch in the back of the boat for their main power.
Yep.
But how many main switches do you have then? So you have trolling motor and all your graphs. You have 2?
Yeah. There's 3. There's a breaker for the trolling motor. I personally leave that on all the time. And then I have the main for the boat, and it has a jump mode that can jump mode if my starting battery gets down. And then I have a separate, switch just for the electronics. So I can turn all the electronics. So that what I mean is by your fish finders, your live scope, your 360, any of your graphs on your dash, all of that goes to that main switch, and you can isolate that.
That's good. That's good.
So all of the wiring that I run is 10 gauge. We have brought in some more wire. Some people are running the 8 gauge. I know there's some wiring harnesses out on the market that you can do that are thicker, like an 8 gauge, and you can run multiple electronics off of that. Those are good as well because they go direct to the battery. But the key is to be able to isolate it and be able to know what kind of power you're drawing, because that'll give you an idea of what kind of starting battery or what kind of a house battery to run.
Okay.
So
okay. Well, so we talked about this before the show, but we kind of talked about the Milwaukee or DeWalt battery setup for live scope, and some guys are turning to that, and some claim there's a higher quality of picture because it's running 18 volts for Milwaukee or 20 volts for DeWalt. And what's your thought on that whole setup?
Well, I've worked on several boats that have had this setup, and I think you can have a little bit better quality picture, but I haven't seen where it's that much better to where I would lean towards that. The big hurdle in the industry is everybody's adding all these electronics to their boats, along with the voltage drop, so you're fixing that problem, and then you get down into a battery problem list. Do I have enough amp hour, and do I have enough reserve capacity to be able to handle all of the electronics? And then it kind of branches down to, hey, I have this starting battery, and is this one starting battery alone able to handle all of the electronics I have? What I've seen is if you're a real competitive tournament angler and you're fishing, 2 or 3 tournaments a month maybe, if you have 2 graphs on the dash, 2 graphs up front, you've got live scope, I've basically ruled out one battery being able to sustain your boat. Now, there's other options for that to be able to make it good. Some people have their own opinions on how to do it. I know some people will take all their electronics and run it onto a house battery, which is fine, and it will work. But when you do that, you actually have to add another onboard charger to be able to do that. So you go back basically from a 4-bank onboard charger to needing another one. So you're going to have 5 banks that you have to charge. So you're going to have to buy like a NOCO Gen 1 just for that one battery. What I've been doing in the last couple years is if you have the room, we'll take 2 Group 31 AGMs, and you can do it with flooded too. If you're just a weekend angler, you can do it with the flooded as well. You can put 2 batteries there that are the same model and size, and you can link them together in parallel, and basically that doubles your cold cranking amps and your amp hours. So that's what we've been doing, and we've had great success with that. So, typically if you're running 1 battery and you've got all those electronics, around, depending on how much you're using it, around lunchtime, you're going to start flashing. When you go to turn your key on, your electronics will turn off. You'll start seeing low voltage alarms come off.
When you crank that big motor over and the graphs turn off, it's not good.
Exactly.
We've all been there.
Yeah, you're having problems, and so that's what I did. I run the Deca. It's called an 8A31 DTM. It's their Marine Group 31 AGM. It's the Intimidator, and I run both of those in parallel. And I never have to worry about any of that. And I know it's adding a little bit more weight to your boat. And, I used to be a speed freak. I wanted to run as fast as I could. And, running the NPFL, I'm it's really not benefiting me really by running that much faster. I'd much rather have the extra capacities in the battery and know that my system's going to work all day. And I've never seen any of the flashing. I mean, I leave everything on. I'll leave my live wells on. I'll leave my recircs on, and I just don't have issues with that setup.
So as you know, and like you just said, graphs are becoming one of the biggest players in fishing. I mean, it is, nobody can see past that. It's got to be live scope 360, 2 graphs on the front, 3 graphs on the front, 2 graphs, maybe even 3 graphs on the dash. What's your 2 cents on, how does that improve your fishing personally, and how, you know what I mean? Like, some guys claim, we don't need this many graphs. All you need is one on the front, one on the back. Let's roll. Let's just go fish. But
yeah, well, I'll be the first one to tell you I'm not real good at graphs. I mean, a lot of the youth, the 20s and the 30-year-old kids, they were brought up with it, and they're extremely good on graphs. Any of the guys that are, live scope guys, I don't have that. Hopefully I'll be having the Hummingbird live here pretty quick on my next boat. But the guys that are live scope, you can clearly see that they have an advantage when it comes to that, if they know what they're doing with it. Out of all the people that I know that have live scope, whether it's Lowrance or Garmin, I would say about 20% of those individuals actually know how to use it. Mm-hmm. And you can tell by the success they have in tournaments. And if you see them on video, how they're doing it, they can see the fish that's moving. They know if it's not reacting to that bait, mm-hmm. and they can switch it up to
like
bait.
A John Sukup.
John Sukup. He is one of the best in the world at it.
Yeah.
Now you've seen his past tournaments, his last couple tournaments. You can see that he can go shallow and play with the best of them too. Uh-huh. But he definitely is one of the best in the world at that. And maybe one of these days I can get him out to show me something once I get some live capability. But as far as the mapping and stuff goes, I think people have got a lot of that down pat. Mm-hmm. I've got Mega 360 this year, and I've been able to tweak it and try to find different things, like the different colors will stand out more. We were just at Winnebago, and I've able to see reefs and rock piles a little bit better. Not necessarily fish. Sometimes you can see some fish on there, but that has helped me. But I have noticed that I don't look down at my graphs as much as I probably should.
Yeah.
Like some of the new guys and the young kids that are really good at it.
I mean, from fishing the college circuit, I can say this, that I'd say, let's talk about this too, about the NPFL. So you take the whole pool of anglers. So there's how many guys are in the NPFL?
105 this year.
So let's say 100 guys.
Yep.
And I've talked with a bunch of guys about this. About 50% of them are guys that are out there fishing that don't know how to use a graph other than mapping and 2D or down imaging. They understand when they go over a brush pile, go do that. And then there's 25% of them that can go turn on live scope and effectively catch fish through that. And then the other 25% are actually effective in mapping, side scan, DI, side imaging, 360, live scope, like everything.
Yeah, definitely.
How does that compare to a professional level?
Well, those percentages transfer over. Mm-hmm. It's just because certain people are good at what they do, and you'll probably see this, like, let's say going into next year, if we go to lakes that are, let's say where live scope won't be into play, you're going to see the guys that are not very good at live scope, they'll start to excel in that one. Mm-hmm. Some guys that are like John that are universal, he'll still be a big player in that, but some guys that are dependent on live scope will be towards the lower end of the rankings on those lakes. But it's so I know you'd brought up the DeWalt's. With the Garmin's, you can run a higher voltage on those. With that and installing the DeWalt hookups to be able to do that, run at the higher voltage, you're bringing in, and I'm not saying it doesn't work good and the people that have it hooked up good, that it's not a good setup, but you're bringing in more things that can fail. And that's what, in my fishing and how I rig my boat, I try to keep it as simple as possible, because I think that the more things you bring in, it's the more opportunities to have issues, and then you're trying to troubleshoot out on the lake. Mm-hmm. That's kind of why I went to the 2 batteries that are in parallel, to where I can really cut down on what I think can fail out in the field, and it's done really good for me. A lot of our pro staff guys through Wholesale Batteries are running the same setup, and they've had nothing but success this year with it, and it's kind of each people get their own opinion, and we're not knocking one way.
Yeah,
but there's a certain way
personally,
I like to do it.
I ran the Milwaukee setup all last year. Mm-hmm. I rigged that up just as a college student, and it worked. But so I just got my new boat, and it obviously does not have the Milwaukee setup. And the picture, like he was talking, I'm sure there is a difference, but in the big picture of when, like, day in and day out live scope use, there's probably isn't that much of a difference to risk a failure. Yeah,
what I've heard from different people that have done it both ways, you can't really tell the difference. Mm-hmm. Or from one boat, they might be side by side, you might be able to tell a little bit different. But But the Milwaukee, that technology is a lithium technology.
Yeah.
They're running that in lithium, and that kind of comes to another subject of lithium in the marine industry is like, everybody's going to lithium. And is it the good time to do it? What's the different type of technologies? A lot of the marine engine manufacturers will put out a bulletin that we do not want lithiums for starting capabilities. One thing about lithium is it's really good when it's working. And that's in our testing, and we found that out. We carry PowerSonic lithiums, and we've had nothing but success with PowerSonic on the trolling motor side. Some of the ones we brought in for starting initially, they didn't meet what our expectations were, so we pulled that and we didn't do it. And there's some out there on lithiums on the starting side that are good, and people have success with it. It's basically what your budget is, I would say. A lot of pros are running lithium, and they're running lithiums, and they get really good discounts.
So are they running lithiums on starting and trolling motor batteries, or 3 lithiums for trolling motor batteries? And
some of them are running for starting. Brands that I know that there's really only one brand that I know that's really successful in the starting, and I haven't heard any, negative things to it. And that's Lithium Pros. The guys that are running Lithium Pros, they've been great to them. From a starting standpoint. Now, if you get into the trolling motor standpoint, there's batteries that are 36 volt, and there's batteries that are 12 volt. Typically, the 36 volts. They'll be a 40, 50, maybe 60 amp hour. So if a guy sticks one of those in their boat with no other lithium batteries for his trolling motor, in my opinion, you're kind of playing with fire, because if that battery fails, you're dead in the water from a trolling motor. A lot of guys will run another 36 volt and they'll parallel them to double the amp hour. That seems like a good system, but I caution people with that setup if they're in a lake that is away from getting any support.
Yeah.
So let's say you're out in that setup and you're running that 36 volt, and one of them goes down. Well, you're down to that 40, 50, or 60 amp hour battery, which might work and get you through. Or potentially you have a backup that you can throw in there. But if you get to a point to where you're down, and you need to do something to be able to operate, you've got to switch back to the 12 volt, either wherever you can find them, any big box store, whatever.
Yeah.
And then you've got to be able to wire that up correctly to be able to do it with the interconnecting cables and stuff like that. That's why we've kind of elected to go with the 12 volt lithiums.
yeah, because if you have 2 batteries that are running parallel and you have to go buy 3, 12 volt, and you have to wire them all the night before a tournament or the day before you're going out.
Exactly. So. And guys are having great success with those. I just try to eliminate, if there is a problem, how quick you can get back on the water.
Yeah.
So, if you're running the 3 12 volt lithiums, let's say one of them goes bad, which can happen. You can pull that one out and throw a regular standard flooded deep cycle in there and get you by. So that's what we try to do at Wholesale Batteries, is keep it, as simple as possible. Something that our customers, once we install it for them or they install themselves, can do the maintenance and work. We're big on cleaning the terminals 2 or 3 times a year, because there's some adverse effects on the onboard chargers on whether it's fully charged. If there's any resistance or with dirty terminals, that voltage spike will spike up there, and then the onboard charger will say, hey, I'm charged, and it's actually not fully charged. So if you keep those terminals clean, your batteries will last a lot longer than what they are now. So,
well, perfect. Well, we're going to go ahead and end it here, but thank you so much for coming on and explaining it all to everybody, because I know everybody has a lot of questions about it. So.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call Wholesale Batteries. If you're in the market for any type of other batteries, alkalines up to critical power batteries, automotive batteries, you can jump on our website at wholesalebatteries.net. And you can order them straight online there. And we've got 2 locations. We're in Kansas City and O'Fallon, Missouri, so up by St. Louis. So don't hesitate to stop in and say hi.
Awesome. Well, I'll drop that link in the bottom of the video. But once again, thanks for coming, and hope you have a good day.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks.